Whispering Woods is taking on more responsibility. While Genevieve Joyce manages a big new project and delegates to the correct people, Jimena Alvarez works with protest groups and wildlife foundations in South America to find displaced species a new home. Sylvester Kane of Silvicorp International is eager to double his profits, but at the cost of many threatened and endangered habitats. While Tristan and Xander Joyce continue to back the corporation, the youngest Joyce sibling has made up his mind. The Haven welcomes Simon Joyce as its newest staff member, but he needs to prove himself to the team. Imogen Chen is busy with new animal intakes, Antonio Garcia is busy researching South American themes, and Arthur Joyce is a little distracted, shall we say. Fortunately, Wesley Parsons is back from school and he's brought fresh new ideas and a brand new attitude with him. Welcome back to Whispering Woods, Wildlife Haven. Hey everyone, Sparrow here. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Whispering Woods. Yes, we are already back with season 3, no long break this time, and that is thanks in large part to the Americas DLC. Just gotta ride that wave while inspiration is fresh, you know? So we are going to be building the South America Dome today. We're going to be starting with that and then adding our very first animal from the New Americas DLC. My South American dome, I wanted to make it out of glass pieces, so I ended up using these hexagonal pieces. And once I had one curve that I was happy with, I duplicated it to the other side. That piece in the center is flat, so it's easy to rotate around. And instead of just rotating the arms multiple times and then having a bunch of glass pieces overlaying each other, I ended up doing each layer on its own. And this is because through trial and error, I found that doing the entire arm and having a whole bunch of overlaid pieces and then having to go back and delete them was just too much effort. And the thing is, you do have to go back and delete them because otherwise they really screw with the shadows and the frame rate. So it's just easier to do each layer on its own. And I think it also looks really pretty. Like, it ends up looking like a sort of flower almost. So this is just me rotating every single layer on its own. The further down we went, the more difficult it got. I find you have to keep your mouse sort of towards the edge of your screen to really get control. If it's too close, then you're just going to end up swinging things around in various directions. So that is our dome complete. Going to recolor it to sort of a bluish color. I'm not entirely sure about this yet. If you know any color codes that give you a very natural looking glass, then my comments are always open. Please drop me a comment down below. Now, of course, we can't just have glass resting on the ground, so I'm going to add a plaster wall underneath. And once I build my first section, we're just going to rotate that into place the exact same way we did the glass. If you need a little bit more of a tutorial for how to do the rotation technique, especially for domes, I highly recommend Dutch Lion's tutorial. I watched that video at least 2 or 3 times while attempting to do this. So this worked out decently well, which means that his tips are great. So you should definitely go check out his video as well. Here I'm just double checking, making sure that everything is lined up correctly. And then once I have that, I'll make sure there's nothing overlaid to kind of help with that Z fighting. I will slide it all into place, and our South America dome, the shell of it at least, is complete. Now, right outside the entrance, I wanted to have the first South American animal sort of as a welcome to this area. And for that purpose, we will be using the New American Flamingo. So right now, I am digging out their pool area. The idea for this habitat is to have a boardwalk that sort of goes through this shallow pool that the flamingos are playing around in and have the guests get as close as possible to the flamingos. I'm going to paint that with a bunch of rock as my base, and then I'm going to go in with a smaller brush set to about 20 or 30%. I'm just going to tap in other textures. So you can probably see the redo button at the bottom just flashing. So that is every single click I'm making. It is really annoying. It makes your finger hurt, but it definitely works to make a more natural texture. and it means that you can layer the textures a lot more easily. For the path, this is our boardwalk. I made sure to have an angle snap on just so that I could easily replace it in the same way each time, because unfortunately, working with water and paths is a little bit annoying, and that means that I will be having to replace this multiple times. So of course, as soon as I went to go put some animals into this habitat, it started to absolutely pour rain. So in the meantime, I'm going to do a little bit of management to make sure that all of the animals I want to keep are in the trade center. I'm going to establish my work zones, just make sure they're all working well. And the desert house is a lot bigger than I remember it being, so I'm going to hire a few additional staff members just to help out in this area, as well as make sure that the scarab beetles have all of their enrichment. Oh, and there's our keeper that we just called to clean. Alright, it has stopped raining, so that means it's time to continue building. For the American flamingos, I wanted to have architecture that was more of a Caribbean-colonial style. So if you don't know the history of the Caribbean, a lot of it was occupied by British sailors for quite a long period of time, because the Caribbean was a very central port in South America, and a lot of goods would go through there. So in order to control trade routes, that was obviously the best place for the British to go. So a lot of Caribbean architecture is very colorful still because it is part of the tropics, but you will find a lot of British influence or colonial styles in that architecture as well. So that's why we have a lot of columns, we have a lot of that clean limestone look. There are shutters on the windows a lot of the time. The lamps are sort of this wrought iron looking style, very similar to the new Fiesta lanterns that we got with the Americas pack. So you'll be seeing a bunch of those hanging around here, but that is basically the style we're going for here. So in the center of the boardwalk, I wanted this circular viewing area / indoor shelter for the flamingos. And so I'm using a bunch of limestone pieces to make that happen. Unfortunately, we don't have thin enough wall pieces, so here I am using one of the trims instead. So this took a little bit of wiggling around to make sure that everything was lined up correctly, but I do really love the way it turned out in the end. I'm setting up one of the walls. I find that it's easiest to make sure one section looks as perfect as possible before rotating it into the other areas. Just going to line the window with another ledge to make it look like the glass is actually set into something. And then I can rotate things into place and clean up the little edges, as you can see me doing here. The rotations are just the circle trick, the pillar trick. I didn't actually put down a mud pillar for this one. I figured since I'm building on a circle plan, I don't actually need the pillar, and it did mostly line up. I did have to wiggle a few things around, but for the most part, it did work out. So you don't always need to use a mud column in the center. To allow the flamingos to enter this area, I'm going to build them a ramp that goes directly into the water. The staff have pretend access to this area through a door on the right wall, but because this is Planet Zoo, the staff won't actually be able to reach this area, which means I only put toys and bedding in here for the flamingos so that we're not getting annoying alerts about staff not being able to reach something in the habitat. To top off our viewing area, I'm adding some shingles for the roof. Shingles were very commonly used in colonial style architecture, and usually they'd be a little bit more colorful or just straight up white, but I find coloring these white makes them way too bright, and coloring them a bright color kind of takes away from the dome behind this structure. So we're just going to keep it nice and neutral. We're still going to make sure that things line up nicely. So every second panel I ended up using these smaller shingles, and this will just help prevent overlap in the grand scheme of things, so you can see things lining up a little bit more nicely there. Again, with our circle trick, lots and lots of circles in this one, you guys. Here is a porch that is sort of sitting on top of this structure. A lot of Caribbean-colonial buildings would have a porch directly above the entrance. So this obviously doesn't really have an entrance, and it doesn't really have a front or a back. So I'm just adding the porch on top as sort of a good nod to those porches. And then above that, I'm just gonna top it off with a taller roof. It's not quite a spire, but they do have like a tower-like feel in a lot of places. And with the first building done, we're gonna move on to the Flamingos backstage building. I'm laying out the building in concrete. For the most part, we're just going to be doing the decoration on the front of the building. We're going to build a facade, but not necessarily go all out on this one, because realistically, no one's going to be seeing the back of this building. And this would also be saving the Haven some money, especially since we talked about bankruptcy a few episodes ago. If you haven't seen that video, go check out the gift shop. But we were making way too much money, so I shared some tips on how you can bankrupt your zoo, and those have been working really well. So we are actually making a lot less money. I realized also that we didn't have donation bins anywhere in the desert house, so that could also be a contributor. So I'm adding that same limestone trim just to bring over the same style from the other building. We have our big windows with the shutters, and of course more columns lining the entrance. We're gonna have these on either side of the door. The door will be changing because I realized that the flamingos couldn't actually enter the building, so it will be a little bit wider, but it'll look mostly the same. And once the columns are in place, we will build that porch that I was mentioning, usually right over the doorway. So just lining those up nicely. This is obviously not going to be accessible in game, but again, this is just a facade, it's just for decoration. And then I spent way too much time trying to figure out what colors I wanted to make this. A lot of colonial style architecture, because again, it's in the Caribbean. It was very colorful, and you will see a lot of blues, you'll see a lot of pinks, you'll see some greens, some yellows. And so I played around with those colors and I found that I didn't like any of them. Like the pink looked a little bit too much like a Barbie doll house, and the blue wasn't quite working with the backdrop of the dome. I very much felt like the fairies in Sleeping Beauty. Make it blue, make it pink. And so we finally ended up with sort of a beige looking house with blue accents. And I think that's where we're going to stick with it. Underneath the roof, I'm adding some support. You'll find these on a lot of buildings as well. This was really to just add some extra detail. The building felt kind of unfinished until I added these little things, and it really helps to elevate the build, I think. With the building complete, it was time to take out the water and take out the paths and put the enrichment items in. These forage feeders, I wanted to have them inside of the pond, so I'm placing the water, taking it back out, making sure the land aligns with the forage feeder where I want it to. We're going to have quite a few of these in here because American flamingos need at least 20 adults in their group to fill their social need, which is a lot of animals, which also means that you need more enrichment items in order to satisfy their needs. And since we're playing in challenge mode, very similar but also different, we'll need more feeders. So that's really all there is to this. I did also add the waterfall frame while I was at it, and then always make sure to put the water back in before you add the path, because you won't be able to add the water once the path is in. So here we are buying up more flamingos because we again need 20 of them for them to be happy. And while we wait for those to arrive, I wanted to add a little courtyard to this facade, because this is also something you will commonly see with colonial style architecture. It's sort of this diamond shaped pathway in front. Sometimes you'll have grass poking through it, sometimes it'll just be bricks laid out in a diamond pattern. But of all of the inspiration photos I used, I'm pretty sure all of them had this motif going on, which was really cool to see. So I did want to emulate that. And we are going to make it look a little bit overgrown and like the earth is slowly reclaiming it. Not sure if I love these colors, but they blend in a lot better once we start adding some foliage. which, speaking of, we will be flanking the entrance with some nice greenery, including some palms and bracken and so many other plants in this habitat. I haven't used this many plants in a habitat in a very long time. We'll also add some flowers here, such as the azalea and the buddleia in these pots. These pots are by Ricey off of the workshop. And then it was time for a bunch of trees. These trees are not tropical at all because they would have to survive in the UK outdoors. So we'll be working with our regular beech and ash and elm trees just to give a little bit more height to this enclosure. You can see me checking all of my sightlines, making sure I'm very happy with them before moving on to the lower growing foliage. I usually like to do this first, just to make sure that I'm setting up the viewpoints correctly before going in with the little details. The fig trees work really well as bushes if you sink them into the ground. Also plenty of hedges in this one to hide the walls and the fences and all of the stuff that we don't really want our guests paying attention to. We really want the animals to be the main focus. And then of course rocks. The rocks will help sit the forage feeders into the land a little bit better as well. And ponytail palms. I haven't actually used these very often, but I know they are a staple in many tropical, not even just tropical builds, literally any build for a lot of Planet Zoo creators. From Caesar Creates to ZSH Plays, they're always using ponytail palms, and I can see why they would hop on that bandwagon. Some reeds as well, seeing as we are right next to the water. These ones unfortunately have a pretty big hitbox and they don't allow animals to traverse through them, but the common reeds do, so that is always a good second choice. Some aquatic rocks, which we will be sinking into the ground as per usual. These are the #1 tip I give to any builder is rocks. And if you feel like you have enough rocks, you should put more. And here is some grass just peeking through these tiles, make it look a little bit reclaimed. And finally, we're gonna finish up with some benches and the new Fiesta bins. And it looks like our flamingos are ready for some visitors. We did so much building in this episode, but I am so pleased with how it turned out. Both the Caribbean-colonial architecture and that big South American dome in the background, which we will be getting started on soon, but not quite yet. The flamingo models are just absolutely amazing. I've heard lots of comments about how it's just a reskin, but it is so well done, and I'm so happy to have these guys in the game. Let me know what you think of this enclosure and of the new America's DLC in the comments below. Leave a like if you liked this video, and don't forget to subscribe or join the nest to further support me as a content creator. Whispering Woods will be back next week, so remember to hit the bell icon to be reminded of an upload, and I will see you next time. Bye!